Okay, so we did our presentation all over Fear, Grit, and Failure by Addie Paulson and Olivia Cross.
All right, so the fears and traumas we experience are the cause of the stories we make up inside our heads. We have to learn to step out of our comfort zones and become curious with our emotions in order to grow. We also need to become comfortable with our fears by talking about them so that we can make a choice about how we respond and react to these traumas.
The willingness to see what your fear is all about can help you get past that fear and understand why you had that certain response. The author proves that curiosity is the strong desire to know or learn something, and we truly do need this to become aware of our emotions and act accordingly with the right decisions. We need to become curious about our fears and emotions, and by doing this, we can ask questions and talk about it aloud. This benefits you because you are stepping out of your comfort zone to grow and fully understand. When you understand how you feel and what is being caused these stories and what is causing these stories, then you are more likely to make better decisions. A quote that was brought to my attention I felt was very important to me was fear will drive us. Through emotional processes like talking about your fears, we can learn how to overcome them and grow from them. We have to remember that we have a choice over the stories we create, and with this, we have the control over how we interact with others and also how we feel about ourselves.
You need to step out of your comfort zone that we are born into to be able to grow. You can't really trust yourself if you are addicted to comfortability. An important thing we need to realize is that comfortability is something we are afraid to leave, which leads to a lack of development. Bringing attention to the idea of comfort, in the story that we read, Brené Brown says, created this little world around us and to do the work. When we control our comfortability and are willing to put in the work, just like the metaphor suggested, we can essentially grow and leave the little world that was created around us and not be so separated from each other. He uses the words addicted to comfortability. Being in a story loop that causes fear and anxiety causes us to get emotionally hooked. When we are emotionally hooked to this idea, there is no room for growth and improvement on leaving the stage of comfortability. We have been shown how comfortability is something that we are born into, and because of this, we have to learn to step out of our comfort zones. She's proving that having an addiction can make us more dependent on things, and even having an addiction to comfortability is a possibility.
When you experience emotions like fear, you can make a choice about your actions or how you respond to those. These actions can either leave a positive or negative feeling on you. If you do not like the outcome of your actions and choices, you can choose to do something different the next time based on what you have learned about yourself. Failure is sometimes a glorious thing, causing you to reevaluate your actions and what you could do differently to improve yourself.
Growth is a risk factor that most people are afraid of, but when we choose to become curious about our fears, that is when the most growth happens. When a person is growing or experiencing growth, they often become more aware of the things around them and how to react to certain situations. Failure and heartbreak were the ones that gave me the most access to understanding what was happening behind the scenes in the story. When we have failures, it often has us very emotionally heartbroken and upset with ourselves. But when these things happen to us, we can then see another view of how things could have gone differently, and it essentially makes us want to continue to try and succeed instead of fail. Hill shows us the growth from failure by saying, okay, I'm going to do this work. It's uncomfortable, but I'm going to do this work. Fear comes with many risks, and risks can be uncomfortable. Putting in the work to overcome the fears shows a huge growth in one's being.
The first thing we need to recognize is that a story is an imaginary account of many events told for entertainment. The stories can also be made up inside of our heads. We often make up stories in our heads to compensate or explain what we don't understand, which would be our emotions. But these stories aren't necessarily real or true. Brown explains how when people experience anxiety and fear, they immediately make up a story. Our emotional process of creating these stories happens when outside factors do things that show us signs of abnormality. We can overcome these fears by realizing that we are the creators of the stories and to recognize what is causing them. My interview really sucked. It was terrible, and then all of a sudden I'm working out a whole narrative, said Bryn Brown. People make stories up inside of their heads all day, every day. These stories take a negative pull on us because they are not true. We make up these stories because we are overthinking the worst possible outcome, and in spite of this, we become fearful. In a result, we need to stop making up stories which are going to cause fear, and instead we can understand.
Addison, you want to finish for her really quick? I think she got kicked off.
Yeah, of course. There was just one more slide, so it's okay.
Do you want
Which
me
are
to go?
going to cause fear, and instead we can understand how to control our fears so they do not affect our decision. In our conclusion, ultimately, while in fear we make decisions that our hearts don't long to make, the fears we experience every day are the cause of the stories that are being made up inside our heads. We need to learn that stepping out of our comfort zone is going to help us grow and better understand ourselves. If everyone were to do this, we would live in a society where we are not so separated from one another and always feeling embarrassed or judged. There are many ways to control our fear and anxiety and not make up stories in spite of it.
I think that was a great spoken essay, guys. Thank you for pretty much summing up the entire first semester. That was great.